Hello there. Michael Kenna is 70 this year, and I had no idea what a huge following he has. He's had over 475 solo exhibitions in 40 countries, and 70 books of his photographs have been produced. I haven't been instinctively drawn to his work, perhaps because of the apparent simplicity of it. But I think in his case, it's like so many of life's pursuits. Transforming complex responses into simple representations requires talent, dedication, and wisdom.
I mean, I think photographers are essentially mediums. They're translating what is out there and bringing it through you or through the camera for other people to view. Most people don't have the opportunities that we have as photographers.
As we rush about in our busy world, it would be easy to dismiss a Zen monk as being maybe simple, naive, or out of touch with reality. But in actual fact, they've dedicated their whole lives to avoiding getting caught up in the divisions of the world. Kenna says that he looks for what he cannot see. He prefers to include elements of suggestion in his photographs rather than producing an accurate description of the scene. He has drawn from the photographic masters before him like Ansel Adams, Eugene, Aget, and Alfred Steeglitz. But he also added ingredients of Zen to build a language of landscape photography that is really his own.
Well, I come from a Western tradition, so most of the early photographers that influenced me were Western. So Bill Brandt, English photographer, very, very powerful use of shadows, graphic design. His ability to print in a manner that was very unconventional at the time. A lot of black, a lot of white. Eugene Aget photographed in Paris for many, many years. Again, I mentioned that for me, what I got out of it is that he would go to the same place over and over and come out with completely different photographs, time and time again.
They say that the camera never lies, but it can stretch the...
Perhaps it was growing up in Cheshire in the northwest of England that made him gravitate towards a minimalistic approach to photographing nature. Cheshire was one of the hubs of development during the Industrial Revolution, and people were worked to death in overcrowded cities. It's not like he grew up during that time, but that area of England still retains the scars from that period. He spent 7 years in a Catholic boarding school where there was a tradition of ritual and discipline, and something called magnum silentium, which is Latin for great silence. Each day there were extended periods when nobody was allowed to talk, and this practice obviously hit home for him because his work is filled with silence. He considered going into the priesthood, but eventually chose to direct his spiritual inclinations into his art and eventually into photography.
I mean, it goes back to also philosophy and theology. And there's a man named Paul Tillich, a famous theologian, that said that doubt is central to faith, which means that whatever you believe in, you have to doubt it. As soon as you actually accept it, it becomes dogmatic, basically. So whatever it is, whether it's the law of thirds or symmetry, or you have to continually kind of nudge it and punch it and pull it and fight to be out of the boundaries.
At the beginning of his career, he started gaining commercial clients, but he kept his personal work as a hobby. In the late 70s, he moved to the US and settled in San Francisco. There he met Ruth Bernhardt, a German-born photographer who was inspired by Edward Weston and Steeglitz. She experimented with nudes and surrealism and was drawn to photographing everyday things in a minimalistic manner. Not only was she a great photographic mentor, but Kenna also learned the patient art of darkroom printing. He spent 10 years printing Bernhardt's photographs, and this experience helped him to develop his craft. After seeing Bill Brandt's exhibition called The Land at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, he was inspired to deepen his own engagement with landscape photography. Over time, he developed a deceptively simple style that's been described as minimalistic. But it's a lot more than that because he manages to instill a Zen-like quality of calm into his photographs. and he's communicating that there are mysteries around us that are beyond reason and logic. He developed a technique of photographing in low light situations and often exposes for long periods of time, sometimes up to 12 hours. This technique gives the images a sense of time or perhaps timelessness. When looking at these static two-dimensional images, one feels that time has passed and nature's been really busy while the shutters remained open. Even though he says that he often goes off to sleep when the camera is working, his process takes on the form of a meditation. This approach has allowed Kenna to separate out his landscape photography from, say, the work of Ansel Adams. Adams was intent on reproducing exactly what he saw at the moment when he pressed the shutter.
Again, in music, sometimes we have spaces where there is no sound. Sometimes we have a long note as opposed to a lot of short notes. In photography, as in all the other arts, I think you don't necessarily have to fill up the rectangle.
Kenna is 100% analog. He only uses film cameras and prints his own photographs in his darkroom. He initially started shooting on 35mm and then moved to Mamiya 6.7 and then settled on the Hasselblad 2 1/4 square.
I shoot film for many, many reasons. All of the really good aspects of the digital revolution I rebel against.
Yes.
I don't want an instant gratification.
Yes.
I don't want to know what I've just photographed. I don't
Yes.
need this high fidelity. It's for me. I prefer this slow process. I prefer the journey more
Yes.
than the destination, frankly. So.
Yes.
If it takes me 6 months to get to a print, that's absolutely fine. It's not all very controllable, which I really like. I don't like it to be so predictable that I know exactly what I have each time.
He isn't rigid about maintaining the square format. If he feels it should be a vertical or horizontal, he will crop in the darkroom. When he prints square, he almost exclusively goes for an 8x8 inch enlargement. This is because he's worked out that with an 8x8, the best viewing distance is about 10 inches away from the image, and this distance of interaction helps invite the viewer into his work. Square format photographs do exhibit a feeling of calmness, so it is his preferred format. He strangely also carries a Holga lomography camera, which produces images which are almost the polar opposite of the precision of his Hasselblad work. But together they provide an interesting contrast. When he's working, he thinks that it's important to be focused and concentrated, which for him usually means solitary, quiet, and away from distractions. So no people asking questions or cell phones, and no time limits. He's happy for the process to take, say, 5 minutes or 5 days. And his inspiration is dependent on the light, the atmosphere, and also what creatively he's reacting to. There's one anecdote where he says that one day he was driving to Scarborough in Yorkshire, and he picked up a hitchhiker who, when being dropped off, thanked him by saying, "The luck of the Irish to you." I won't attempt to get that accent right, but it's a popular saying. That same day, while walking along the harbour, he noticed that waves continued hitting a section of the harbour wall. This photograph has been compared to the Hokusai famous Great Wave print, and it's become one of Kenna's most sought-after works. He not only patiently uses long exposures, but he also pursues subjects over many years. Sometimes his projects can take up to 10 years to complete, and he usually juggles up to 10 of them at the same time. He sees his work as being broken up into large chapters that he returns to again and again. He came across this particular tree on the banks of the Kushiru River in Japan. He saw it as an oversized bonsai, elegant and graphically powerful. He developed a relationship with this tree, and over a decade he would return again and again to photograph it. It eventually got chopped down for safety reasons, but he was quite philosophical about this. His approach to his subject matter is similar to that of building a relationship, allowing a connection to deepen over time. Kenna repeatedly visits countries and locations. Japan and France have been key inspirations for him. He sees France as rich with possibility and romance, while he finds Japan mysterious and alluring. The country's religious and spiritual history is reflected in the landscape that he chooses to photograph. His images have been described as haiku poems. These poets have to condense substance, mood, and emotion into 3 short lines. His favorite time of year is winter. It's sparse and atmospheric, and provides the uncluttered background that a minimalist looks for. He's probably best known for his nature landscapes and especially trees, but during his career he's developed interest in other concrete subjects like English power stations or US car factories, also the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, Catholic confessional booths and Buddha statues. I'll show you a few photographs from these categories and then return again to his life and photographs. In his Seattle home, his archive now contains over 175,000 negatives, and this work, accumulated over 5 decades, reflects his belief that everything is connected in some manner. He says that he still asks permission from his subjects to take the photographs, not in a formal verbal way, but in a manner which feels that he's working in collaboration with the subjects to produce beautiful results.
As they say, you don't necessarily walk up to a tree and say, "Hi tree, nice to meet you, can I photograph you?" Or "May I photograph you?"
Yes.
But you may think it, you may have a certain cerebral conversation with that living organism.
I hope that you enjoyed seeing Michael Kenna's work, and my selection was just the tip of the iceberg, so if you're interested, take some more time to explore it. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.
It comes down to passionate intensity and hard work, basically. I mean, those are the things that get you there. But it's hours you put into it. As I say, I mean, I've been doing it for 40 plus years, but it's kind of daily, nightly, it's all the time. You're always looking.
Yes.
And any photographer or any artist or any sports person, any dancer, they're constantly practicing.
Yes.
And you never know when the right moment occurs.
The
you
decisive
have no
moment.
idea. Yeah.
Yes.
It just you just don't know.
Yes.
But you had to be prepared for it. So
Yes.
What was it? Pliny says, "Fortune favors the brave," and then Pasteur said, "Fortune favors the prepared mind." And my favorite one that I think I invented is, "Fortune favors those who work the hardest." And as a photographer, it is that. There's something unique about every single person.
Yes.
And you have to tap into that.
Yes.
And it's not easy to find. If it was easy to find, we'd all be creative geniuses.
Yes.
Very few of us even have the time to get there.